I heard a story where a user had, I think his thermostat was connected to the Internet of Things, was connected to the smart home. It was hacked, and this hacker was not only speaking over the loudspeaker in their home, but was adjusting the thermostat, turning on the heat in the middle of summer, and doing things like that. So that's just one example of how those smart homes and smart devices can be compromised. What can a user do, a homeowner do, or an end user do to kind of like alleviate some of these things?
Well, protect your network is one of the biggest things. What happens a lot of times is people think you get a router, right? You get your router and your cable modem or whatever you're using to connect. That has a password separate from your Wi-Fi password that allows you to set up a configuration on the router or the wireless network of who can access and a lot of different things. And those passwords are defaulted to the type of router that it is. So when you buy one, it's a default password. If you don't change that, someone can figure out fairly easily what kind of router you have. They can connect to your network, connect to that router and change things and allow them in, block you out, do all kinds of different things. So that's one thing that a lot of people forget to do. If they don't have it set up by a professional, and you don't necessarily have to. There's all kinds of YouTube video and documents, tutorials on how to do this, to go into that configuration page and change that password. Pay attention, run virus scanners where you can. Pay attention to things like that. There's not too many other things you can do. Most of those devices don't have their own individual like firewalls or virus scanners. But that's a big one that happens often.
Yeah, I remember in our preliminary conversation, you talked about how easy it is if someone knows what brand your router is.
Right. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, to find that, which was shocking to me.
Yeah, right. Like if you have a D-Link router, you can look up on D-Link site. They'll tell you what the default password is.
That's crazy.
Or Netgear or whatever, and they'll list the types and what the default passwords are for sure. So that's why you should change them as soon as you put it in.
Yeah.
To something reasonable. It doesn't have to be, 40 characters, but something 10 characters or more are really hard to break by brute force, something like that. Maybe a couple special characters or something, but something other than whatever the default is.
Absolutely, and I think most people assume, even if they're having it installed by a professional, I think they assume that default password is sufficient. It's good enough.
Right.
One wouldn't assume that every router in existence from that manufacturer has the same default password. One would assume that it's unique, but it's not.
No, it's not, because that would be hard to keep track of, right? You'd have to create documentation based on, I guess, the serial number of what the password would be, and that would be really, really hard to manage and keep logistics. And if people forget, because what happens is if you forget your password, usually there's a way to reset the router. Might have a button, or sometimes you get like a paper clip and hit that little, and it'll reset the router, go back to the default settings, which includes the default password. And so if they didn't do that, if they had a separate one for each default, that would make things really messy and complicated.
Yeah, it makes sense from a logistical standpoint.
Yes. They expect you to change it.
Yeah, they expect you to change it. I think that's what our viewers need to hear.
Yeah,
they expect
they
you
do.
to change it.
They
So
do
that default
expect you.
password is there for
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, for reasons of just getting you set up.
Yes, yes, just to
yeah.
get started.
Just for the installation process.